I'm back and gonna finish the shell. One of the nice things about these sculptural projects in clay is you can keep covering them up and coming back to them over time. So it's been weeks since I worked on this shell, and today I started doing some more work on it. The thing is, as long as you keep it damp, you can keep projects going a long time. So I kept adding a little water, just getting a sponge wet and moistening, especially the outer edges. And as long as you keep it wrapped up in plastic and keep it moist, you can continue working on it for a long time. But what I'm doing now is finishing all of the texturing of it. So I've done quite a bit of it now, trying to get a sense of the ruggedness of the outside of the shell, but this part I'm going to glaze so it'll be smooth. So I think it'll be a fun kind of contrast. And the lid, I have kept it in place with a piece of damp paper towel under it. So that has kept it easy to remove, doesn't get stuck. And then I've just worked on smoothing it out, and you can just get your fingers wet and you can work a lot of the unevenness out of the clay. Especially in this case, this is white clay, and white clay is very amenable to this kind of smoothing out. I just want to show you a little bit of what I'm doing in order to create this texture. So I'm going to move the camera now, trying not to get clay all over my computer. Start realizing, in these times of shelter in place, how dependent we are on our computers. So I don't want to do anything that would damage it. Okay, so now here we go with a view of the shell. And these are some of the tools that you can use for this kind of work. And this is the shell that I'm modeling it on. Although now, at this point, I'm just kind of free-forming it. Just doing it, abstracting some of the concepts of the live shell. Because I don't want to have to. Some people would want to do it exactly the same, but that's not the way I want to do it. I don't have the patience for it. So these are some of the tools. This has proven to be a very useful little tool. This is a tiny little wire loop, and on the other end it has a kind of a thumb shape for smoothing things out. This is another very good tool. It's a small trimming tool. Fettling knife is good. And I'm using a somewhat stiff paintbrush for when I have little crumbs that I want to get out. I'm just brushing them out. And of course, all of those little crumbs are going into here so that when this settles, I can recycle that clay. So I'm just going to give you an idea of how this is working. And I always want to keep that lid in place. Now at this point, the clay is very stiff leather hard, so it's okay to leave the lid just like this. I don't have to put the wet paper towel in there because it's not going to stick now. And so what I'm doing here, I'm trying to get a sense of these beautiful lines that come across. And so I'm using this little tool and trying to create a flow that goes all the way across. So you've got to go back and see where you've been. This will be all right. Just do it this way. And I love this way of working with clay where you carve into it with, the British refer to this as cheese hard. I guess it's sort of like Parmesan cheese or something. It's just that nice texture, almost like soap, and it carves so beautifully at this stage. So I'm running these lines across, and then I'll try to keep that. Oh, got some of my hair in it, but that's okay. That just is going to burn out. And then I'm going to try to get a flow across here. And this is one of those things that just depends on you, you know, how detailed you want to get with stuff like this. I like it I like enough detail that you really want to look at it. It's interesting to look at, but I don't like so much detail that it's going to drive me crazy. That's basically my criteria. Okay, now I'm going to just run this other way. So I'm showing you these things so that you can think about how you want to do your own projects, not to tell you you have to do it this way. Okay, I think you guys know me well enough by now that I don't necessarily want you to just do it my way. I want you to think about the expression you want and see if you can accomplish it. Now this is resulting in a rough surface that I'm actually going to smooth out a little bit. So I want to show you how that works. Because in general, you know, there's no absolutes in ceramic. But generally, it's not good to have sharp edges, you know, surfaces that feel too rough to your hand. They're unpleasant after they're fired. It's better to just smooth them down a little bit. You can still have a lot of texture, but see, I'm just taking the roughness off of it. And this is going to kind of unify the pattern a little bit more too. Oh, and check it out. See how different these two sections are? That's because I wasn't really looking at this one. And I think I like this one best, so I'm going to work on this one some more and try to get it so it's not quite so much of a checkerboard. This is something you can keep playing with. You can mess with it for a while and set it aside, keep it damp, come back and do some more on it on another occasion. You really have a lot of leeway with clay as long as you keep it moist. That's the key. It's just don't let it dry out. Once it dries out, you kind of hit a point of no return, and you have to go with it the way it is. Let's see, now that's more, they're more alike now. I'm gonna do some up here. Clay is such an amazing material. Really, there's nothing like it. You know, there's no manufactured materials that are like clay. Natural clay is just so wonderful, and it comes right out of Mother Earth. Yeah, I get a little bit of it over here on the. You want to be careful now. where you have a lid, watch out for your edges that you don't damage them. It's a little bit trickier to try to repair damage at this stage. If you do have to, if you break something and have to put it back together, it's good to get the piece wetter. Wet it down a little bit first before you try to slip and score and add a piece back on, but you can do it. Sometimes I've seen even pieces that were dry. If you, like, for example, if it got dry and I broke one of these little points, I might be able to put it back on. It's tricky and doesn't always work, but sometimes if you get it wet, and then you score and slip, and best to do it with vinegar. There's less expansion with vinegar of the clay than there is with water, so it's more likely to stay together later, because if there's less expansion, there's going to be less shrinkage with it when it dries. So if you had to do that, you would wet it with vinegar and then score and slip it. Well, score it and then make slip with the vinegar. And then when you put it together, you would press it and keep pressing. You're compressing the clay as it dries. And hopefully then it will stay together. But that's only if you have to repair something that got dry. It's better not to have to do that because it's really difficult. So try not to damage things. Try to be sure that you got it the way you want it while it's still leather hard. So this is the hard leather hard stage. It's really nice consistency right now. You can see in here that I finished off this flange because I didn't want it so funky as it was. And I'm taking just a little bit of water to just smooth the edge. I'm also going to just texture these parts a little bit. Now you're always going to struggle with how to glaze something like this, because so many glazes will cover up a very fine texture like this. This is a very fine line I'm creating here, and most glazes would completely cover it. So what I probably will do on this is I won't glaze the outside of the shell at all. I will only glaze this part, the operculum, I believe that's called, because I want that mother of pearl kind of look for it to have. So I'll use a very nice white glaze on that and no glaze on any other part of this. However, I will want to stain all of this texture. So after it's been bisked, I will brush on some iron oxide or some black stain or maybe a little bit of both and rub those into the texture and then wipe off so that I have a more dramatic texturing. Oh, here's one area I forgot. This part. And when I was working on this, I realized there's some aspects to the way the shell, the pattern is on the shell that I don't totally understand. So I'm kind of faking it because I couldn't quite, it's not that hard to see it on here, but then it was hard to do it, how it fans out. And so I sort of got that, but mostly I sort of faked it. But, that's your prerogative as an artist. You get to, many people would do this same assignment much more abstractly than I'm doing it. They would give you the idea of the shell without mimicking how the shell is, realistically. And those kinds of decisions are up to you as the artist. You get to do it the way you like it. Some people would work on this much more than I'm doing. And that's fine. If that's what they want to do, they should do it. Okay, so there we're getting the concept, and I think this one's going to work out. There's our lid. So everything's fitting, and getting the crumbs off. I think it's going to be pretty nice. Drying. How do you dry this? Slowly. I'm not just going to leave it out in the air. I'm going to put a loose piece of plastic over it and just let it dry probably for about a week or so until it looks really, really dry and feels really dry. If there's any part of it that still feels cold, it's not ready yet. So before firing, anything like this that is of uneven thicknesses, I tried to make it even, but it isn't perfectly even. There's some areas that are thicker. Anything that has that kind of difference of thickness should dry slowly. We don't want it to blow up in the kiln. If there's some part that hasn't completely dried, it can explode in the kiln, and that would be very disappointing after all of this labor. I'm going to let it dry. When it's completely dry, it'll go into the bisque. It'll be a slow bisque because, again, there's some thicker areas. Just to be sure that it's safe in the firing, I will fire it slowly. And then after it's been bisqued, I'll do some staining and glaze this part. So how are you going to glaze something like this? You wax all around this area that you want to have glazed so that you get a nice clean edge. So that is the shell project. And I hope this was an inspiration for all of you to think about how you can use an object that you have around as the model for a sculpture. I think it's a really, really fun project. And what I've seen so far from you folks that are my students, the things that you've picked out to do were really good, really good. I'm glad to see that you took this idea and ran with it.